And the title of class presentation is Planning with the Troubles Enough. Yeah. Planning with the Troubles Enough? Okay. something excurved. Tonic? We'll find out in a second.
Gin and tonic.
Yes. Second presentation is going to be Aaron on constructing a socialist investment function. And then we have Alfredo. Alfredo, where? Okay, so Alfredo is new. Say hi to everyone. Everyone say hi to Alfredo.
Hello.
Very happy that you're here with us. I think, if I understood correctly, you weren't originally, you were supposed to be in a hybrid session, but you managed to join us physically, which is very exciting. Yeah, normally when people are sent around, it's sometimes tricky to match, but this is actually a great fit, so very happy you're here. And the title is going to be Democratic Computational Economic Planning, an applied perspective on the economic calculation debate using neural networks to allocate resources. I'll be sitting here, I'll do this when you have 1 minute. Okay. Yeah. So, floor is yours. Thanks.
All right. So, yes, I'm Kyle Thompson. Many of you will know me from my podcast with June Reed, General Intellect Unit. But I am a doctoral candidate at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. And this is presenting some research that I've done with my colleague Joost Vervoort there. So you may be wondering about my title. X-curve Platonic Conjurations of Resident Discomfort for Democratic Economic Planning. I was just having some fun, but I promise you that it is relevant to the contents of this presentation. All right, so overview of this talk. First of all, I'll give a summary of the research I've conducted in the Anticiplay project, which ran from 2020 to 2025, was funded by NWOBD grant, and the Games for Better Futures workshops that were held as part of Anticiplay. So these are sort of practical things that I've done, which I believe have some relevance to planning, and I would like to bring into the conversation. There's a discussion of this X-curve futuring technique, or technique for considering transitions and how we adapted it for our planning work. And there's a discussion of how this relates to Donna Haraway's Staying with the Trouble, which is where the very strange title comes from. And finally, I'll provide some workshop examples. So first of all, I would like to talk about where the work that I have been doing at Utrecht University sits relative to the concept of planning. So there is this paper, 4 Approaches to Anticipatory Climate Governance, Different Conceptions of the Future and Implications for the Present, that Caroline Wiederman, one of my colleagues, has written, and I would strongly encourage people to take a look at this. It's a great paper for understanding different ways to consider the future and anticipatory governance. So you see here that there is a kind of layout of different approaches to futuring. There is the probable and improbable dimension of consideration or conceptualization, and the implications for the present. And when those two things come together, you get this assessing probable and improbable futures in order to help inform strategic policy planning to reduce future risks. And this is generally the domain that she says is associated with planning. I think there have been a lot of conversations about what does planning mean exactly. This is one potential way to think about it. But I would like to call attention specifically to, I wonder if I can get, yeah. I would like to call attention here to this one, this pluralistic conception of the future with the association with mobilizing. And this one here, scrutinizing the performative power of future imaginaries in order to interrogate and shed light on their political implications in the present. So this would be about interrogating and performative approaches to the future. I think that the work that we've been doing with the X-curve would fall more in these lower right areas of future conceptualization and work. But I still think that it is relevant to the sort of adaptive considerations of planning that we've been talking about in the previous session. So the methodology specifically I would like to talk about is called the X-curve. This is a method for talking about and conceptualizing transitions that was developed at the Dutch Research Institute for Transitions, or DRIFT. You can find the specifics of it in this paper here. And it is designed from the start to be an actionable transitions framework. So there were various conceptions of how transitions happen that they were looking at, and then they said, well, what if we develop something from the beginning that was focused on action and application? And this is where the X-curve came from. And it's been used in various governance and planning contexts. If you want details about that, please look at the paper. You know, this is kind of sector level or institutional level stuff of talking about transitions, of, you know, where is our institution going to go? Where is our economic sector going to go? So to explain specifically what the X-curve is about, it says it asserts that transitions always involve two central dynamics: one of creation, which builds and institutionalizes new alternative practices and structures, and one of destruction, which refers to the destabilization and breaking down of existing practices and structures. The X-curve framework captures the interactions between patterns of buildup and breakdown, and does so by focusing on the varying roles regime and niche can play in this. My colleagues and I additionally adapted the X-curve to add these additional action pathways that specific actors can engage in between the different dynamics that are captured in the X-curve. And this helps with planning work in terms of envisioning potential scenarios that these actors could engage in. And we have applied these principles in workshops we conducted on transitions in the game sector. So this is the adapted X-curve model. The main points that you see on the X-curve itself are the original ones, the original dynamics of the X-curve. And so essentially you see from the bottom left to the top right, there is a dynamic of buildup, and from the top left to the bottom right, there is the dynamic of breakdown, right? So you can, using the X-curve, you can talk about like where is our sector in these dynamics? What is going on? How can we conceptualize that? And additionally, we have added these action pathways where you can see the relationships between the different dynamics, both within the build-up and breakdown side and between build-up and breakdown themselves, because we can conceive build-up and breakdown happening at the same time within a particular sector. So for example, you know, we have between destabilization and acceleration, there is an action pathway of people challenge the existing order. So how is that happening? How could that happen in our sector? Let's consider a scenario, let's consider who the actors are and what is going on. This is the kind of workshop engagement we did with workers in the game sector, interested academics, and people involved with funding in the game sector. So this is kind of just like a snapshot of what this looked like. We were working on Slack, the coordination platform, and we had at the top the X-curve, and we explained this to the participants, and then in the bottom we had all of the results of our previous workshops. There were like 4 workshops we had done previously that were categorized according to the action pathways that were on the X-curve, the adapted X-curve. And then at the bottom there, you see the new ideas that people came up with in our final session of what these different action pathways could look like. And the thing that I want to call attention to specifically here is that if you look at our previous sessions, there's a big gap here, right? In these specific action pathways. And then you look at the final session and this gap has been filled in. And I think this is the most important thing to talk about here. So I want to talk a little bit about Donna Haraway's idea of staying with the trouble. It's from her book, Staying with the Trouble, Making Kin in the Cthulhu Scene. So she says, you know, what is staying with the trouble, right? Staying with the trouble is not making an imagined future safe. Staying with the trouble is learning to be truly present as mortal critters entwined in myriad unfinished configurations of places, times, matters, and meanings. So at first, this might appear to be antithetical to planning because we want to plan for desirable or even optimal outcomes that would produce safety for people. However, if our planning involves learning to be present with our entwined situation and the troubles it can be different, right? So, you know, people have been talking about, like, for example, in the last session, we were talking about, like, we need to think about how actual institutions really function, right? Like, that's staying with the trouble. Like, what institutions are really here now that are involved in our planning efforts? I know we also had a previous conversation over dinner where people were talking about the importance of understanding conflict in socialist organizations and planning with conflict in mind. I think that's also staying with the trouble. So I would suggest that this idea of planning with the trouble is quite important to what we do. And the X-curve could maybe be relevant to that kind of approach. So our workshop experience suggests that engaging with the action pathways around the chaos, emergence, institutionalization, and breakdown dynamics, these central ones around that main crisis point, this encourages participants to stay with the trouble in ways that they are likely to otherwise avoid discussing and envisioning out of discomfort, right? Talking about conflict is uncomfortable. Talking about the seriously difficult, chaotic, breakdown phases of transition, and this could be between capitalism and communism, or this could be even within some kind of imagined socialist regime. You have a sector that is undergoing technical change or something like that. Like, this is really important for people to think about, but they have a tendency to not think about it. They think about the before and they think about the after. They don't think about the middle, and the X-curve says you need to think about the middle. You need to think about the trouble. Right? So this approach, I believe, could be useful in other planning endeavors, whether they're institutional, they're sectoral, or broader ones, and we would encourage its adoption. So, for example, in our workshop, under the action pathway of in chaos, people resist transition and defend positions, participants discuss shifting, like what would happen, what would the people who are in charge resist, and how would they defend their positions. The shifting responsibility to legislators while also lobbying for inaction to those same legislators. So if they are, in charge of large games companies and they're facing sustainability demands, pass the buck on to legislators while also secretly paying them to do nothing. Starving sustainability-based games of funding, spreading disinformation with ostracizing statements within the industry, shifting attention away from the games industry to other issues. Oh, it's not really that big. This industry isn't really contributing that much to global carbon emissions. Like, why don't we look at somebody else? And we also would find passive resistance motivated by the fear that changing business and development models will undermine the competitiveness of game studios and lead to layoffs. So, putting people to sleep to taking action by emphasizing the fears that they have about their security. So at the end of the workshop, we kind of just to give you a picture of like sort of where this ended up. You can find more details about this on our blog, which is listed there on Medium, the Anticiplay blog. We just came up with this little model to summarize what everybody said in the workshop and what kind of picture that created of where the games industry might look, or what it might look like if it were more sustainable. And I won't get into super big detail about it, but basically there is this, one side, maybe the yang side of things and the yin side of things, something like that, where this is about the people, the structural configuration of the industry, the real work that people are doing in producing games. And then on the other side, we have like more of a sort of a symbolic or aesthetic dimension of like what people produce, the worlds they imagine, that kind of thing. And how these two come together to produce a coherent image of sustainability in both material and symbolic terms. And I think it was a nice result that we got out of the workshops as a result of really grappling with these things. So if you would like to contact me, there is my contact. That's all I have to say.